They didn't mean to leave me out. Not officially, anyway. That's the part that stung the most. It wasn't a fight, or a slammed door, or a cruel word I could hold up and say, "See? That's where it broke." No, it was quieter than that. Softer, like someone pulling their hand away slowly. So slowly you don't notice until yours is left hanging in the air. "She's here. We're both fine. We'll call you when we're ready for help." That was the text. No photo, no phone call, just a neat little message with 2 exclamation points, and none of the warmth I used to know in her voice. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the cardigan I'd knitted during her pregnancy. Pale yellow, just the shade her nursery had been painted when she was born. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then locked, and I still didn't move. "We'll call you when we're ready." I didn't know what that meant, only that it wasn't now. But I set up the nursery anyway. Just a small one, in the guest room. A crib that folded easily, a new mattress with little stars on the fabric. I found my old lullaby bear in the attic, its batteries long dead, but its fur still soft. I sewed a new ribbon on its neck, bought diapers in size 1, not bulk, just 1 pack. Maybe she'd stop by. Maybe they'd need to run errands. Maybe I'd be useful again. Every morning I made the guest bed tight, folded the tiny blankets again, even though no one had touched them. I left the curtains open so the afternoon sun would fall across the crib. It made the whole room look gentler, like hope lived there. I waited days, then weeks. No call came. Once I nearly drove over, just to drop off a box of things, booties I'd knit, a bottle warmer, a small keepsake book I'd started filling in. But I stopped myself. I didn't want to seem pushy. I didn't want to be a bother. Funny how quickly love turns into caution. One afternoon, I pulled out an old photo album, the kind with plastic sleeves and curling corners. On page 12, there she was, my daughter, born during a thunderstorm in June. No epidural, no family nearby. Just the nurse, the doctor, and me, 35 and terrified. I remember holding her for hours after the delivery room emptied, watching her tiny hands stretch like starfish. I whispered promises to her then, that I'd always be nearby, that I'd always be the one who stayed. A week later, I mailed the gift box, tracked it even, said delivered at 10:03 a.m., but no one said thank you, no text, no picture of her opening it, just silence. A friend came by that Thursday, an old neighbor, the kind who still brings coffee cake in Tupperware. She peeked into the guest room and gasped, "Oh, are they coming soon?" I smiled. "I think so, just not yet." That night, I baked cookies. Not just any cookies, her favorite, the ones with the orange zest and the little sugar crystals. I made a full batch. I don't know why. Maybe I thought she'd stop by. Maybe I thought the smell would drift out and tug her in like it used to. No one came. I ate one, then threw the rest out. 2 weeks later, I found out from Facebook. She had posted a photo, a brunch with the baby. The caption read, 3 generations of love. Her, the baby, and the other grandmother, a woman named Sharon with neat hair and an Instagram that looked like a lifestyle magazine. I wasn't tagged. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that photo in my mind, like it was etched behind my eyes. I kept thinking about when I taught her to walk, how I'd held her hand so tightly, and then one day, I just let go. She fell. I felt awful. But she smiled. She stood again. I thought I'd taught her independence. Now I wondered, Had I taught her how to leave? The baby's first birthday passed in June. No invitation came. I wrapped a present anyway. A stuffed bear that played "You Are My Sunshine." The same one I'd sung to her when she was teething. I placed it on the shelf beside the other unopened gifts. In August, I took the nursery apart. Carefully. I folded every onesie, every blanket. I wiped down the crib and disassembled it, wheeling it into the garage. It was quiet work. No one asked what I was doing. No one checked to see if I was okay. I dropped off the birthday gift on their doorstep the next day. I didn't ring the bell, didn't leave a note, just set it down, turned around, and walked back to my car. It felt like setting down something I couldn't carry anymore. That night, I had a memory I hadn't visited in years. My own mother, silent and stiff, in the hospital chair after I gave birth. She didn't say much, just held the edge of the blanket and nodded when I told her we'd call when we needed her. I thought she didn't care. Now I understand. Maybe she was just waiting too long. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not a card, not a call. A note, written quickly, in my daughter's looping hand. Sorry we've been distant. Life got overwhelming. Hope we can visit soon. I held that letter in my hand for a long while. Read it once, folded it neatly, and the next morning I went into the garden, dug a small hole by the back fence, planted a rose bush. Not just any bush, one I'd been rooting from a cutting all summer. A card on a little stake read, "For the child I raised and the child she now raises." Then I dusted off my hands, went inside, boiled water for tea. I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped waiting at the window. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing sharp about it, no sudden turn, just a pause. A small space where warmth should have been and wasn't. I was at the kitchen sink, rinsing out the glass bottles I'd saved from the baby shower. The blue ones with the cork stoppers. My daughter had said they were charming, and I'd agreed, though secretly I thought them impractical. Still, I'd saved them, washed them, tucked them away for the day I'd be needed again. The sun was coming in just right through the lace curtains. Dust floated like tiny stars in the light. I was humming, an old tune from the radio, one I used to sing when I rocked her to sleep. Back then, she liked it, said it sounded like summer. Then the phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. My heart lifted before I answered. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, voice steady, light. "Hey, Mom," she said. No smile in her voice, just flat, distracted. "I've only got a second. The baby's finally down, and I need to pump." "Oh, of course," I said quickly, not wanting to keep her. There was a pause. I could hear the creak of a chair, the soft whir of a white noise machine in the background. "I wanted to ask," she said, "do you still have that white Afghan? The one you made when I was little?" My hand tightened around the dish towel. "Yes, it's in the cedar chest. I can bring it over." Another pause. Then a sigh. Actually, Sharon was wondering if she could borrow it. She's doing the baby's 1-month photos, and she said something vintage would be perfect. I told her you might have something. Sharon, the other grandmother. Of course, I said. I'll fold it and leave it by the door. Thanks, Mom, she said, already half gone. We'll swing by when we get a chance. I almost asked, could I come with you? Could I see her, just for a minute? But the question felt childish in my throat. I swallowed it. Before she hung up, she added, "Oh, and if you get a chance, could you not post any photos yet? We're trying to keep things minimal. Just share through our group. Our group, not mine. Of course, I said again, my voice so quiet I barely heard it. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then set it down gently beside the clean bottles. It wasn't unkind. Nothing she said was mean. It was just careful. Careful in the way people are when they've decided where you fit, and it's not at the center anymore. I folded the Afghan that afternoon. It was softer than I remembered. The yarn had worn just slightly, giving it the gentlest texture. I remembered the nights I'd stitched it, sitting up while she kicked in my belly, humming that same summer song. I tied a ribbon around it, pale blue. It felt right. As I placed it by the door, something tugged at me. A memory, sharp and sudden. She was 5, came home from kindergarten with a macaroni necklace she made just for me. Close your eyes, she'd said. It's not perfect yet, but I made it with my best colors. She placed it around my neck like a coronation. Back then, I was her favorite person. And now I was a supplier of vintage props. That night, I made dinner. Set one extra place. Habit. Hope. Both, maybe. I baked the sourdough rolls she used to love, the ones she'd slather with butter until her fingers were shiny. They stayed warm in the basket. No one came. The next morning, I stepped out to check the mail, and the Afghan was gone. No knock. No thank you. Just gone. I stood there for a moment, robe tied tight against the wind, and stared at the empty mat. Then I turned and went back inside. I sat in the nursery, on the little rocking chair I'd brought up from the basement. It creaked now, louder than it used to, but I didn't mind. I just sat there, rocking gently, looking at the crib with its untouched mattress. And I whispered, barely audible even to myself, I'm still here. But the room didn't answer. It just rocked. It's the ordinary days that wear you down. Not the holidays, not the birthdays. Those come with enough hope to make the silence feel like a slap. But the Tuesdays, the Thursdays, the days when no one remembers you're waiting. I started waking earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to be. I didn't. But because I kept thinking, what if they call? What if they need me today? I'd make the coffee just how I liked it, 1 scoop short, half a spoon of sugar, and set it on the kitchen table beside the landline. Just in case, even though no one had called it in weeks. My daughter texted, briefly, usually when she needed to borrow something, a recipe, a photo from childhood, never my presents. By 9, I'd cleaned the counters. By 10, I'd gone through the mail. At noon, I ate lunch standing up. A soft-boiled egg, a slice of toast, the kind of meal that doesn't dirty a pan. One day, I made a whole pot of soup, but after ladling myself 1 bowl, I realized I hadn't spoken aloud in over 24 hours. I turned on the radio just to hear a voice. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the house, pruning the rosebush I'd planted the year she left for college. It had grown wild, thorned, and proud. I liked that about it. Inside, the walls felt thicker, or maybe the air just didn't carry sound the same way anymore. I used to hear the clatter of voices, hers and mine, overlapping in conversation. Now, only the refrigerator hummed, the occasional creak from the floorboards, reminding me that the house still noticed I was here, even if they didn't. On Sundays, I'd bake. Something small, banana bread, cranberry scones, not enough to share, just enough to pretend I might. I wrapped half in parchment, left them on the counter in case she stopped by, She never did. One morning, I logged onto social media, scrolled until my eyes blurred. There were pictures of the baby, of them, strolling through the park, faces bright in the sunlight. Captions like "blessed" and "so much love." Her mother-in-law featured in almost every frame, holding the baby, rocking her, wearing one of my hand-knitted shawls. No tags, no messages, just evidence of a life I wasn't included in. I turned off the computer and sat on the porch instead. The cushion beneath me had gone flat from use. I watched a squirrel run the length of the fence, leaping like it had somewhere important to be. I envied it for a moment. I used to have a schedule, appointments, errands, a knitting circle. But lately, I found myself canceling. What if they needed me that day? What if this was the moment they finally reached out? That moment never came. Instead, there were smaller moments, paper cuts of forgetfulness. One afternoon, I went to the grocery store and saw them. My daughter and her husband, the baby asleep in a sling. I froze near the apples, watched her pick out carrots with one hand while holding a phone to her ear with the other. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. I stayed hidden behind the produce stand until they moved to another aisle. I told myself I didn't want to intrude. But the truth was, I was afraid to see the look on her face if I stepped forward. Back home, I put the groceries away slowly. Each can, each carton, each loaf placed with deliberate care. It felt like anchoring myself, a way to stay present, tangible, real. That evening, I opened the nursery door again, just for a second. The light was soft, pale from the hallway. The crib was still there, covered now with a dust sheet. I hadn't had the heart to take it apart completely. On the shelf sat the memory book I'd sent. I'd gotten it back in the mail. No note, no explanation, just returned unopened. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe not. I ran my fingers over the spine. Then I closed the door. I started cooking less, talking less, waiting less, or at least pretending to. When the neighbor's granddaughter stopped by with a batch of fundraiser cookies, I bought 3 boxes. I didn't need them. I just missed the sound of a child's voice in the house. I tried once, early in October, to suggest a visit. I texted, "Let me know if I can come hold her for an hour sometime. I'd love to help." No reply. 3 days later, a group photo was posted, pumpkin patch, matching scarves. The other grandmother crouched beside the baby, her hands full of small boots and straw. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't asked. I was simply not there. And that's the part that's hardest to explain. It's not that they said I wasn't needed. It's that they didn't say anything at all. And in that silence, I faded. Slowly, like light at the end of day, like steam from a cup left untouched. It was the smell of cinnamon that brought it back. I'd been cleaning the pantry, reorganizing the baking tins, mostly out of habit, not need, when I found the old spice jar tucked behind the flour. I opened it, and just like that, I was in another time. She was 7. It was winter. The kind of winter that wraps the house in quiet, like the world has taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. The schools had closed for snow, and she had begged to help in the kitchen. Said she wanted to bake, like the big chefs on TV. I remember tying my apron around her, the strings twice around her waist, and handing her a wooden spoon too large for her hand. She mixed with fierce concentration, tongue poking out the side of her mouth, flour dusting her cheeks like war paint. "Do you think Daddy will like them?" she'd asked. I nodded. "He'll love them, but these are your cookies. You get the first taste." She smiled wide then, that open, shameless kind of joy children have before they learn to dim it. We sat by the oven, watching the dough rise through the little window like it was magic. She leaned against me, her head just under my chin. I could feel her heartbeat, quick and light. "Mom," she said suddenly, "when I grow up and have a baby, I want you to help me." I blinked, surprised. "Help you how, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "With everything. Like you do for me. I don't want to be a mommy without you." It was such a child's thing to say. Sweet and simple and impossibly large. But I never forgot it. I remember brushing a stray curl from her forehead and kissing the crown of her head. "You won't ever be without me." She reached for my hand and squeezed it tight. "Promise?" "Promise," I whispered. Years later, when I held her hand through the contractions of her first real heartbreak, a boy named Tyler, who called her beautiful, then stopped calling at all. I remembered that moment. When she went off to college, I tucked that wooden spoon into a box of kitchen supplies. She found it during orientation week and called me, laughing, saying it made her feel brave. When she came home, pregnant and nervous, I sat on the couch beside her while she folded onesies and read baby books. She'd rest her head on my shoulder, like she used to, and say things like, "You'll come stay, right? When she's born." And I said yes. Of course, yes. But then the baby came, and with her, a new orbit, one I was no longer at the center of. I stood in the pantry for a long time, jar in hand. The smell was the same, but it didn't comfort me. It only reminded me what had changed. Back then, my hands had purpose. They were always full, of groceries, of chores, of little bodies needing comfort. Now they hung at my sides, idle, waiting. Sometimes I wonder if it's like gravity, if people eventually just fall into new orbits, leaving behind those who once held them. I closed the jar gently and placed it back on the shelf. That night, I opened an old photo album, the kind she used to flip through on rainy days, asking, "Was that me?" Even when she already knew. There was one picture I paused on. Christmas morning, maybe 95. She was perched on my lap, a ribbon in her hair, clutching the doll I'd stayed up late stitching clothes for. Her face was lit with that same open joy. And I looked younger, yes, but more than that, I looked known, seen, held in the center of her small universe. It's strange how a picture can ache. Now when I see photos, I'm not in them. Or if I am, I'm on the edge, half blurred, someone's elbow hiding my face. That Christmas morning, though, I was right in the middle. I closed the album gently, hands resting on the cover. Sometimes, I wonder if she remembers that promise she asked for in the kitchen. The one where she said she'd need me, always. I kept my end. She just forgot she made it. It was the envelope that did it. A small, cream-colored square tucked between a grocery flyer and an oil change coupon. My name written in soft blue ink, her handwriting, unmistakably hers. Looped letters, the M, just a little taller than the rest. No return address, just Mom. For a moment, I stood frozen on the porch, the mail clutched to my chest like it might flutter away if I moved too quickly. The late afternoon sun had begun to tilt, casting long shadows on the steps. Even the breeze seemed to pause. She'd written. After all the silence, the missed calls, the one-word texts, she'd taken the time to write. I carried it inside with the care of something breakable. Sat at the kitchen table, the one where she used to do her homework while I stirred soup and corrected her spelling. I turned the envelope over once, twice, pressing my thumb along the flap, afraid to open it too quickly, afraid to shatter the fragile hope swelling inside my chest. Maybe it was a thank you, maybe an invitation, maybe she was ready, finally, to reach back. I opened it slowly. Inside, a folded note, short, rushed, blue ink smudged where her hand must have slipped. Sorry we've been distant. Life's just been overwhelming. Hope we can visit soon. No, love you. No, miss you. Just that. 3 lines. I read it once, then again, then a third time, as if something new might appear between the lines if I stared long enough. Hope we can visit soon. Soon, like a placeholder. Like a word you use when you mean not now, but don't want to say it. I set the note down beside my tea, now cold, and pressed my palms flat against the table. The room felt smaller than it had a moment ago. Or maybe I had just taken up more space, briefly, with the possibility of something warm. The next morning, I ironed the little dress I'd been saving, pale yellow with embroidered ducks across the hem. I'd bought it last spring, thinking of the baby's first birthday. She'd be walking by now, probably. Maybe talking. I hadn't heard her voice yet, not once. But I packed the dress in a small box anyway, added the soft book with crinkly pages I'd found on sale. No note this time. Just tissue paper, folded corners, and a piece of twine wrapped like a ribbon. I placed it on the passenger seat of my car and drove across town. The streets were quiet, a Tuesday lull, and the light had that sharp, early spring clarity that makes everything look newer than it is. Their house came into view. Blue shutters, a tricycle by the porch. I parked across the street. I didn't ring the bell, just set the box gently on the welcome mat and stepped back. Through the window, I saw shadows moving. Her husband, maybe. Maybe her. I thought about waving, about waiting, but I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked back to the car. At the corner, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The box was still there. By the time I got home, the house felt unchanged, familiar. But something had shifted in me. I made lunch, sat down at the table with my sandwich and tea, opened the envelope again, as if the note might feel different with food in my stomach. It didn't. It felt like something written out of obligation, like a receipt, not like love. That night, I lit a candle at the kitchen sink. A small one, lavender-scented. I'd bought it for her years ago, but she'd left it behind when she moved. The flame flickered in the glass jar, casting soft ripples of light along the backsplash. I stood there for a long time, watching it, letting the silence settle around me like an old coat. Maybe they would visit, maybe they wouldn't. But I knew then, I wouldn't be waiting at the window. Hope is a lovely thing until it keeps you from leaving the porch. And I was tired of waiting with cold tea and unopened gifts. I blew out the candle, watched the smoke curl and vanish. The house stayed quiet. But so did I. It's a strange thing, reaching the end of something without any noise. No slamming doors, no harsh words, just stillness. A long, heavy stillness that settles in the bones. I didn't notice it all at once. It crept in quietly, like dusk. At first, it was just a pause in the conversation, then a delay in response, a missing thank you, a missed call that didn't get returned. And now, Now it's been a month since I last heard her voice. I sit at the kitchen table most mornings, not because I'm waiting, not exactly, but because there's nowhere else to go. The chairs in the living room creak too much. The bedroom feels too far from the phone. And I don't want to sit in the nursery anymore. It's not a nursery now, not really. Just a room full of folded things no one ever needed. My body feels slower, heavier, like I'm carrying around something that used to be hope, but has turned into something far more quiet and far more dangerous. Resignation. There are days now when I don't speak at all. Not a word, not even to myself. I move through the house in silence, folding things that don't need folding, straightening books that haven't been touched in years. Once, I caught myself wiping a spotless countertop. And I thought, what am I doing this for? Who is this for? I didn't have an answer. The tea kettle whistles, but I don't always pour the water. The toast pops, and I let it cool. My hands go through the motions while the rest of me drifts. Even music feels like too much. The radio plays in the background some mornings, but I don't listen. The notes slide past me, failing to land. Even the songs we used to hum together, lullabies and old jazz tunes, sound like static now. I look in the mirror sometimes and barely recognize the woman staring back. Not because of the wrinkles or the gray in my hair. I've earned those, but because there's nothing behind her eyes. Just space, just waiting. I used to be someone. Not famous, not special, but someone. I was the person she ran to when she scraped her knee. The one who remembered her best friend's birthday. The one who packed her favorite sandwich when she had field trips. The one who wrote her college essays longhand when her computer crashed at midnight. The one who stayed on the phone with her through her first real heartbreak, and her second, and even the third, when she didn't want to talk, but didn't want to be alone either. And now, I'm not even a name on a list. I wasn't invited to the baby's first birthday party. I found out about it the same way I find out about everything now, through a picture someone else tagged. She wore a pale dress. The baby had cake on her nose. There were balloons in the shape of the number 1. The other grandmother held her, laughing. I stared at that photo for a long time, not in anger, not even sadness, just stillness. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in a long time, not because I'm strong, but because crying is an investment in something, and I have nothing left to invest. I tried once, months ago, to say something, to reach across the gap. I called, left a message, something simple. Thinking of you, let me know if you need anything. She never called back, and that was the moment it hit me. I'm not part of the life she's building. I'm just a chapter she's closed. That realization didn't come like a wave. It came like a whisper, a soft voice inside that said, "You can stop now. No one's listening." The loneliness isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It's not dramatic. It's just always there, like a draft under the door, like a hum you can't locate. It's there when I pour tea for one, when I turn down the thermostat and no one notices, when I sweep the porch and find the same leaf again and again, no matter how often I clear it. Sometimes I whisper my own name aloud, just to hear it spoken. It doesn't help. It's not anger I feel. It's not even grief, not anymore. It's depletion, like I've been a well, and they've drawn and drawn and drawn. And now, there's nothing left but dust and echoes. I gave them everything I had. And when I ran out of things to give, they simply stopped coming. Not with cruelty, with indifference. And that, somehow, hurts more. Because you can fight cruelty. You can argue with it. But indifference? Indifference is a locked door with no keyhole. And I've been knocking too long. It was a Wednesday when it happened. A plain, gray-skied, middle-of-the-week sort of day. The kind of day where time stretches thin and long, and the walls feel closer than they should. I'd finished tidying the kitchen for the second time, wiped the table until the cloth grew damp in my hand. There was nothing left to clean, nothing left to wait for. I stood at the window with a mug I hadn't filled, just holding it for the warmth. My garden, still clinging to winter, looked brittle. The last of the marigolds had gone dark around the edges. Even the wind sounded tired. That's when I saw it, the box, still sitting on their porch. 3 days since I dropped it off. The same tissue paper crumpled under the twine, the same yellow dress now speckled with pollen. No one had taken it in. At first, I thought maybe they were away. A trip, perhaps. But the stroller was by the door. The porch light had come on each night. And that morning, their trash bin had been moved to the curb. They were home. They just hadn't opened the door. I didn't feel anger. Not like I would have months ago. It wasn't a jolt. It was a slow, quiet folding, like a blanket after a long night. Careful, deliberate, final. I stepped away from the window, placed the mug in the sink, and pressed my hands to the countertop. The granite was cold. I stood there a long time, not thinking, just listening, to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the old wall clock. That's when it came. Not a voice, not a grand revelation, just a sentence in my own mind, small and certain. This isn't love, not anymore. Not the kind I gave, not the kind I held them in, not the kind that says, I see you, I care. This, whatever we had now, was distance. Not by miles, but by intention. I had become the quiet background in someone else's story, the safe option, the backup plan, the one who didn't complain, didn't ask, didn't make it harder, the one who waited. And I realized, maybe they needed that version of me. But I didn't. I didn't need to be the one who waited at the window with a plate of cookies no one would eat. I didn't need to fold blankets in a room no one visited. I didn't need to hold space that no one stepped into. Something had to shift, not in them, in me. I pulled out the drawer by the stove, the one with coupons, old birthday candles, a stray screwdriver. At the bottom was a notepad. I hadn't used it in months. I wrote one line. You are still here, even if they don't see you. I read it aloud. Once. Then again. The voice that spoke it wasn't bitter. It wasn't loud. It was mine. And it was steady. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't call anyone. I didn't make a grand plan. I just stood taller. Took a breath that went all the way down. I hadn't been forgotten. I had simply been waiting for someone else to give me permission to stop waiting. And I didn't need it anymore. The next morning, I opened the garage. It groaned the way old things do when they've been closed up too long. The air smelled of rubber and dust. My knees ached with the damp, but I didn't mind. I moved carefully, past boxes of Christmas lights and bags of old potting soil, until I found it, the crib, still disassembled, still leaning where I'd left it months ago, after I realized she would never sleep in it here. The mobile was tucked inside the frame, a faded arc of cloth stars, and a tiny bear that played Brahms' lullaby when you pulled the string. I'd sewn that bear's bow myself, pale green, her favorite color. I touched the edge of the mattress. Then I let my hand fall. And I knew what I had to do. It wasn't an act of anger. It wasn't a message for anyone but me. That afternoon, I borrowed Carol's truck. She's my neighbor, 82 and sharper than ever. Didn't ask questions when I knocked on her screen door and said, "Do you still have those donation forms?" Just nodded, handed me the keys, and smiled like she already knew. At the community center, they asked if I was sure. "It's a beautiful set," the volunteer said, running her fingers along the crib's smooth rail. "Someone's going to be very lucky." I nodded. "That's the idea." She handed me a receipt. I didn't take it. "Keep it," I said. "Let someone else use the space." Back home, the room felt emptier, but in a way that didn't ache. The air moved through it differently, like something had been unlatched. I opened the window and let the breeze in. It smelled of rain and lilac. Then I brought in the chair, not the rocking one. A simple, upright seat from the guest room, covered in a woven blanket I'd stitched decades ago. I placed it near the window and set a small table beside it. On the table, a lamp, a book of poetry, and a notebook with a pen. I called it my new corner, a space not for waiting, but for being. That evening, I sat there with a cup of chamomile and began to write. Nothing grand, just sentences, thoughts, a record of myself, not as a mother or a grandmother or a backup plan, but as a person, a woman still here, still thinking, still whole. I wrote about the rose bush I planned to plant, about the trip I might take in the fall, about how the light came in through the slats of the blinds and painted lines across the floor, the same way it did when she was small and napping on my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't wait for the phone to ring. I simply wrote. That night I slept with the window cracked open, the scent of lilac drifting in. The wind moved through the house like it knew its way. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt like a person with a room of her own. It was the box that reminded me, the one I'd set by their door weeks ago. Yellow dress, soft book, neatly folded tissue paper. I never got a call about it, never saw a photo, never heard if the baby wore the dress or crinkled the pages of the little book. For a while, I'd imagined it was lost, taken in and forgotten. But this morning, as I stepped onto the porch for the mail, there it was, placed neatly by my own front door. No note, no apology, just returned, as if the gesture had been too much, or too little, or maybe simply unneeded. I stood there for a long moment, not angry, not wounded, just still. The box was lighter than I remembered. I brought it inside, set it on the counter, and untied the twine. The dress was still folded, the book unopened. Even the paper looked untouched. I didn't cry. I made tea. Then I reached into the hall closet, into the drawer with the old family photos. Not the albums, not the ones we used to flip through together, but the loose ones. The ones that never made it into frames. Snapshots from school plays, birthday mornings, beach trips with bad lighting and sandy sandwiches. I pulled out the picture of us in the kitchen. She was 9, maybe 10, wearing my apron like a cape. I'd caught her mid-laugh, arms covered in flour, her eyes looking straight into mine. I set it on the counter beside the box, and I whispered, "Thank you," because there was love in that memory. Real love, the kind that holds and builds and sees. And because love, even when it changes, deserves a proper place, I wrapped the photo and the baby dress in the same tissue, added the unopened book, tied it all with fresh ribbon. Then I slipped on my shoes, locked the door behind me, and walked down the path toward the garden. There's a patch of earth near the lilacs, soft, shaded. I knelt there with a small spade and dug a quiet hole. No one was watching. There was no audience, no ceremony, just the breeze through the trees and the steady rhythm of my breath. I placed the bundle in the earth, not out of bitterness, out of release, out of the deep understanding that love doesn't require waiting to prove itself, that silence can be both a wound and a boundary. I pressed the soil gently back into place, patted it flat, and planted a small rosebush above it. Pale pink petals, soft as silk. Beside it, I staked a tiny card. Weatherproof. Plain. It read, "For the child I raised and the child she now raises. I loved you both. I just stopped waiting at the window." Then I stood, brushed the dirt from my knees, and let the wind carry the rest of it away. Inside, the house felt different. Not louder, not fuller, but lighter, like something heavy had finally, quietly, gone. The garden is quiet in the mornings. The birds come first, soft little sounds in the hedges, a flicker of wings in the air. Then the breeze, brushing through the rosebush like a familiar hand. The light is gentle this time of day. Not bright, just present, like it knows it doesn't need to prove anything anymore. I sit by the lilacs with my tea. 1 sugar, no milk. The way I've always liked it, even when I used to add milk because she did. Funny how you forget what you like when you're always accommodating someone else. But I remember now. There's a small book on the table beside me. My notebook. The one I started after I gave away the crib. I write in it every morning. Not much, just a thought, a memory, a few words to anchor the day. This morning I wrote, "I am not waiting, I am living." And I meant it. It's been weeks since I stopped checking my phone first thing. I don't keep it next to me anymore. It stays in the drawer. If someone calls, they'll leave a message. If they don't, well, I've learned not to build my days around maybes. That doesn't mean I've stopped loving. It just means I've stopped offering my heart to an empty doorstep. I've taken up walking again. Not far, just around the block. Enough to feel the sun on my shoulders and the sidewalk under my feet. I wave to neighbors. Buy myself flowers at the market on Fridays. I bake again, not for anyone else, but because I like how cinnamon makes the house smell like December. Some nights I still think of them. I wonder if the baby's laughing now, or if she's taken her first steps. I wonder if my daughter ever finds herself staring out a window, thinking of me. But I don't dwell. I used to. I used to imagine conversations, rehearse apologies I'd never get, picture reunions that never came. I held on to hope like a life raft, even when it was just wood splinters in my hands. Now I let it drift, not because I've given up, but because I've let go. There's a difference. One is surrender, the other is peace, and peace is what I've chosen. The rose bush is growing strong. Tiny buds are starting to open. I water it every morning, not out of duty, out of care. That small card is still staked in the soil, the one that reads, "For the child I raised and the child she now raises." Sometimes I pause to read it. Sometimes I just touch the edge and nod. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day there'll be a knock on the door. A small voice calling, "Grandma?" from the porch. Maybe my daughter will remember what it meant to be held through the night by someone who never asked to be thanked. But if she doesn't, That's all right. I still have me, and I'm not a placeholder. I'm not a waiting room. I'm a home. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like one again.